Sarah Jenkins fumbled with her luggage as she entered the lobby of Oak Ridge condominiums. Exhaustion etched across her face after a grueling 2-week business trip to Singapore. The red-eye flight had left her drained, but she was looking forward to retrieving her comfortable winter sweaters from storage, as April in Chicago still carried a bitter chill. The basement storage area was dimly lit as always, the fluorescent lights humming overhead as Sarah navigated through the narrow corridors lined with identical metal doors. When she reached Unit 37, her unit, she stopped abruptly. Something was wrong. The familiar silver combination lock she'd installed 3 years ago was gone, replaced by a standard brass padlock she'd never seen before. "What the hell?" she muttered, giving the unfamiliar lock a tug. It held firm. Anger quickly supplanted confusion as Sarah marched back upstairs to the management office, her fatigue momentarily forgotten. Patricia Winters, the perpetually disinterested property manager, barely looked up from her computer when Sarah burst in. "Someone's tampered with my storage unit," Sarah announced, palm flat against the reception desk. "My lock's been replaced." Patricia sighed as if Sarah were reporting something as trivial as a burnt-out light bulb. "Oh yes, Ms. Jenkins," she explained with casual indifference, reaching into her desk drawer. "The HOA board voted last month to standardize all storage units. We sent an email about the master key system. Didn't you get it?" Sarah pulled out her phone, scrolling frantically through her inbox. After several minutes, she found it, a vague notice buried between announcements about spring landscaping updates and pool maintenance schedules. The subject line read, "Building Updates. March," with no indication of the significant privacy change buried in paragraph 4. "This doesn't explicitly state you would be replacing locks and creating a master key system," Sarah said, holding up her phone. "There's nothing here about board members having access to everyone's private storage." Patricia merely shrugged, sliding a small brass key across the desk. "Board policy. Everyone has the same locks now." With mounting dread, Sarah returned to the basement. The new key turned smoothly in the lock, too smoothly, as if it had been frequently used. Inside, her meticulously organized space was subtly but unmistakably disturbed. Boxes had been shifted, some reopened and haphazardly resealed. Her vacuum-sealed winter clothes had been unzipped, her camping gear rearranged, and the protective cloth removed from the antique rocking chair her grandmother had left her. Sarah's hand trembled as she picked up a family photo album, noting fingerprints that weren't hers on the plastic cover. Nothing appeared to be missing, but the violation of privacy made her stomach churn with a mixture of vulnerability and rage. Someone had been through her things. Strangers had touched her possessions without her knowledge or consent. Her hands shaking with anger, Sarah pulled out her phone again and marked the date of the next HOA meeting on her calendar. This was far from over. The Oak Ridge condominium's community room was stuffy with poor ventilation and the collective anxiety of 30 residents. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early for the monthly HOA meeting, claiming a seat in the front row. She had dressed deliberately in her charcoal business suit, the one she reserved for difficult client negotiations. Her notes organized in a leather portfolio. Bernard Thompson arrived precisely at 7:00 p.m., his military-trained punctuality evident in everything from his perfectly pressed khakis to his ramrod-straight posture. At 67, the retired Army colonel ran the HOA with the same iron discipline he presumably commanded his battalion, a fact he subtly reminded everyone of with the U.S. Army retired lapel pin permanently affixed to his blazer. "Let's begin," Bernard announced without preamble, bypassing the customary pleasantries. He ran through the agenda with ruthless efficiency. landscaping bids, quarterly financials, pool resurfacing costs, before reluctantly opening the floor for resident concerns. Sarah's hand shut up immediately. When acknowledged, she stood, maintaining direct eye contact with Bernard. "I'd like to address the new storage unit policy," she began, her professional demeanour masking her simmering anger. "Last month, while I was travelling for work, my personal storage unit was accessed, my lock was removed, and my belongings were disturbed. This was done without my explicit consent or proper notification." Bernard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "We covered this in the March email communication. A buried paragraph in a general newsletter is hardly adequate notice for a major privacy change." Sarah cantered, holding up a printed copy. "Furthermore, I'd like to know why someone felt the need to open my sealed containers and handle family heirlooms." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Eleanor from Unit 12 nodded vigorously, while the Petals exchanged meaningful glances. "This is an invasion of privacy," Sarah continued firmly. "No one should have access to our personal belongings without explicit permission. I request that residents be allowed to reinstall their own locks immediately." Bernard's face reddened slightly as he leaned toward his microphone. "The bylaws clearly state that storage units are common property managed by the association," he stated, each word clipped and precise. "We need access in case of emergencies, water leaks, pest infestations, contraband storage. What kind of emergency requires going through my personal photo albums?" Sarah challenged, holding her ground. The four other board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Carol Wilkins studied her notes intensely, while Michael Abernathy suddenly became fascinated with his water bottle label. Several residents nodded in agreement with Sarah, but most avoided eye contact, too intimidated by Bernard's notorious temper to speak up. "The decision has been made, Ms. Jenkins," Bernard concluded with cold finality, his tone suggesting she was being deliberately difficult. The board voted unanimously. "If you don't like it, you're welcome to rent a storage unit elsewhere." Now, moving on to the next agenda item. Sarah remained standing. "I'd like the minutes to reflect my formal objection to this policy." Bernard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Duly noted, Ms. Jenkins. Now, please take your seat." The offices of Garfield and Associates occupied the 14th floor of a downtown high-rise, the waiting area furnished with tasteful leather chairs and adorned with framed Illinois Bar Association awards. Sarah sat with her back straight, flipping through a real estate magazine without absorbing a single word. Her mind kept returning to Bernard's dismissive tone, each recollection stoking her frustration. "Ms. Jenkins." The receptionist's voice cut through her thoughts. "Ms. Garfield will see you now." Rebecca Garfield was a sharp-featured woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses that hung from a beaded chain around her neck. She rose from behind her expansive oak desk as Sarah entered, gesturing to a chair opposite her. "So," Rebecca began after introductions were complete, "you're having issues with your condo association. Tell me everything, and don't leave out details that might seem insignificant." For the next 15 minutes, Sarah detailed the lock replacement, the disturbed belongings, and Bernard's intransigence. Rebecca took meticulous notes, occasionally asking for clarification on dates or exact wording from the HOA communications. "I've brought copies of the HOA bylaws, the covenants, the recent newsletters, and photos of my storage unit," Sarah said, sliding a folder across the desk. Rebecca spent several minutes reviewing the documents, her expression professionally neutral. Finally, she removed her glasses and looked directly at Sarah. "They're operating in a grey area," the attorney explained, tapping a section of the bylaws with her pen. The storage units are technically designated as common property, similar to hallways or the pool. However, there's an implied expectation of privacy when residents are permitted to install locks and store personal belongings. The inadequate notification aspect is particularly troubling. "So I have a case?" Sarah asked hopefully. Rebecca's expression turned cautious. "Potentially. But I want to be completely transparent about what you're facing. HOA disputes are notoriously complicated. The board has significant legal resources through their management company and insurance. Fighting this could be expensive and time-consuming, with no guarantee of success." "How expensive and how time-consuming?" Sarah pressed. "We'd start with a formal demand letter, then potentially escalate to mediation or litigation. You're looking at a minimum of $3,000 in legal fees to start, potentially up to $15,000 if we go to court. And these cases can drag on for 6 to 18 months, sometimes longer." Sarah winced. As a mid-level marketing executive, she wasn't destitute, but those numbers would definitely strain her finances. "What about simply installing my own lock again?" she asked. "That would technically violate the new policy, giving them grounds to levy fines or take other punitive actions. They could even place a lien on your property if fines accumulate." Sarah stared out the window at the Chicago skyline, weighing her options. The legal battle could drain her savings and drag on for months or even years. Meanwhile, her personal belongings remained vulnerable. She considered renting an external storage unit, but the additional monthly cost felt like surrendering to injustice when she was already paying HOA fees that supposedly covered the existing storage. "I'll need to think about how to proceed," Sarah said finally. Rebecca nodded sympathetically. "That's understandable. In the meantime, I'd document everything. Any further access to your unit, any communications with the board, create a paper trail." As she drove home, stuck in rush hour traffic on Lakeshore Drive, a creative solution began to take shape in Sarah's mind. If Bernard insisted that storage units were common property meant for all residents, perhaps it was time to take him at his word. Sarah spent the entire weekend inventorying her storage unit's contents, methodically photographing and cataloguing each item. The process only deepened her indignation. These weren't just random possessions, but pieces of her life. The vintage record player from her father, the handmade quilt her grandmother had sewn, camping equipment from college road trips with friends. Each item carried memories that felt tainted by strangers' hands. By Monday morning, she'd made her decision. If Bernard insisted the storage units were common property, she would take his words to their logical conclusion. During her lunch break, Sarah visited a craft store, purchasing colourful cardstock, markers, and a laminating kit. That evening, she designed eye-catching flyers with meticulous attention to detail. Community Sharing EVENT, Storage Unit Number 37. Saturday, 10 p.m. All items available to Oak Ridge residents. As our board president has clarified, storage units are common property for all residents to access and enjoy. She added a cheerful border of clip art smiley faces and a footnote quoting the exact bylaw Bernard had referenced at the meeting. After laminating the flyers, she penned a matching notice for the community bulletin board, carefully adhering to the HOA's strict formatting guidelines for posted announcements. On Tuesday morning, Sarah arrived at work early to use the office printer. She created professional-looking inventory tags for each item, complete with descriptions and $0 price listings. She even prepared a sign-out sheet on corporate letterhead, creating the appearance of an official, well-organized community event. That evening, she slit the flyers under every door in the building, all 42 units, and posted the announcement on the bulletin board. She also created a digital version for the building's rarely used online forum, where it immediately became the most commented thread. The next phase was more labor-intensive. Sarah took 2 days of vacation from work, dedicating Wednesday and Thursday to emptying her storage unit of anything truly valuable or irreplaceable. The family heirlooms, photographs, important documents, and sentimental items were carefully relocated to her apartment, hidden in decorative storage containers and under bed boxes. On Friday, she returned to the storage unit with cleaning supplies and organizing bins. The remaining contents, still substantial, were meticulously arranged for optimal display. Camping equipment was grouped in one corner, kitchen appliances neatly aligned on a folding table, books organized by genre, and holiday decorations arranged by season. Each item received one of her professionally designed price tags, marking it as free. She spent Friday evening creating an inventory spreadsheet on her tablet with columns for item descriptions, approximate values, and spaces for new owners' names and unit numbers. A friend from her building's 3rd floor stopped by while she was working. "Are you really giving all this stuff away?" Javier asked, eyeing the high-end camping tent skeptically. Sarah smiled with a calm she didn't entirely feel. "I'm simply embracing our building's community property principles. Besides," she added, securing her tablet in its case, "I'm more interested in the principle than the possessions." As she locked her apartment door Saturday morning, clipboard in hand and a coffee thermos in her bag, Sarah felt the strange lightness that comes with having committed to an audacious plan. By sunset, storage unit number 37 would be completely empty, and Bernard Thompson would have a problem on his hands that no HOA manual could solve. Saturday morning dawned clear and mild, a perfect April day. Sarah arrived at her storage unit at 9:30 a.m., wearing a professional outfit topped with a name badge she'd created that read Community Sharing Coordinator. She set up a small folding table outside the unit with her clipboard, sign-in sheet, and a carafe of coffee with paper cups. At precisely 10:00 a.m., she unlocked the padlock, the HOA's standardized one, of course, and slid open the door with a theatrical flourish, revealing her meticulously organized display. For a moment, she wondered if anyone would actually show up. By 10:15, she had her answer. Mrs. Abernathy from the 2nd floor appeared, curiosity evident in her hesitant approach. "Good morning, Mrs. Abernathy," Sarah greeted warmly. "Welcome to the shaling event." "Are you moving away, dear?" the elderly woman asked, peering into the unit with undisguised interest. "No, just embracing our community's shared access policy," Sarah explained cheerfully, handing her a copy of Bernard's quoted bylaw statement. "Since the board has declared these storage units common property with shared access, I thought I'd share. Please help yourself. Everything is free. I just need you to sign this form acknowledging what you've taken." Mrs. Abernathy's eyes widened behind her bifocals as understanding dawned. "Oh my," she whispered, a smile spreading across her face. "How creative of you." The older woman selected a barely used bread machine and a set of holiday-serving platters, signing the form with a flourish. "Bernard's been lording over this building for too long," she confided as Sarah helped her box the items. "My Harold was on the board before Bernard took over. Things were different then." Word spread with remarkable speed. By 11:30, a steady stream of residents was coming and going. The atmosphere took on an unexpected festive quality as neighbours introduced themselves, some meeting for the first time despite years of sharing the same building. The young couple from 4C, Recent college graduates just starting out were ecstatic over the high-end coffee maker and set of barely used pots and pans. "Are you sure about this?" the young woman asked, clutching the cookware like treasure. "Absolutely," Sarah assured her. "Just be sure to sign here." Mid-afternoon brought the most surprising visitor, Elaine Thompson, Bernard's wife, who slipped in quietly while her husband was at his weekly golf game. "I've always admired your taste," Elaine said softly, eyeing a fondue set still in its original packaging. "Bernard would have a fit if he knew I was here." "What happens at the sharing event stays at the sharing event," Sarah replied with a conspiratorial wink. "The sign-out sheet only requires a unit number, not a name." Elaine left with the fondue set and a stack of coffee table books, her expression a mixture of guilt and delight. By 3:45 p.m., the once full storage unit was completely empty. Even the shelving units had been claimed by a family moving into the building next week. Sarah took photos of the bare space from multiple angles, making sure to capture the HOA's standardized lock in several shots. As she packed up her folding table, Javier from the third floor stopped by. "I heard about what happened, missed the event, but wanted to say you've got guts." He hesitated. "People are talking. I think you made your point." Sarah smiled, reviewing the complete sign-out sheet with signatures from 26 different units. "The event was a success," she said simply, "but I suspect the real fun starts at next month's HOA meeting." The May HOA meeting had record attendance. Residents who hadn't attended in years crowded into the community room, some bringing their own folding chairs when the regular seating filled. Bernard seemed oblivious to the unusual turnout as he called the meeting to order with his customary military precision. Sarah waited patiently through budget reports and landscaping discussions, her leather portfolio balanced on her lap, her expression pleasantly neutral. She could feel the anticipatory energy in the room, the sideways glances and suppressed smiles from residents who now owned her former possessions. When Bernard finally reached new business, Sarah raised her hand with deliberate calm. He acknowledged her with visible reluctance. "I'd like to formally request a reduction in my monthly HOA fees," she stated, her voice clear and steady as she approached the board table. Bernard's brow furrowed. "On what grounds?" "Resource utilization," Sarah replied, sliding forward a professionally prepared document with supporting photographs. "Since my storage unit is now completely empty, I'm no longer using that common area resource." The room fell silent. Several board members leaned forward to examine her documentation, which included before and after photos, the complete inventory list, and signed statements from residents. You can't just give away everything in your storage unit," Bernard sputtered, his face flushing to a dangerous shade of crimson. "Actually, I can," Sarah replied with practiced calm. "As you so clearly stated last month, the storage units are common property managed by the association. I simply allowed other residents to enjoy that common property." She tilted her head slightly. "If the units are instead private property, then the board had no right to create master keys without proper consent. Which is it, Bernard?" Murmurs rippled through the audience. Mrs. Abernathy nodded vigorously, while Javier from the third floor didn't bother hiding his grin. The other board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, Maria Chen, the vice president who had always seemed intimidated by Bernard, cleared her throat. "I believe Ms. Jenkins raises a valid point about the contradictory nature of our current policy," she said, straightening her glasses. "I move that we revisit the storage unit access protocol." "I second," added Michael Abernathy before Bernard could object. "This is ridiculous. Bernard protested, looking around for support and finding none. We can't have residents emptying their storage units in some sort of protest. It wasn't a protest, Sarah corrected him. It was a community event celebrating shared resources. I have 26 signatures confirming it was quite popular. She smiled. Perhaps we could make it a quarterly tradition. I'm sure other residents might want to share their common property. The threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. Bernard looked helplessly at the packed room, suddenly aware that he'd lost control of more than just the meeting agenda. Within 3 weeks, a new policy was established through an emergency board action. Residents could install their own locks, and the HOA would maintain a secure log of emergency access, requiring 2 board members to be present and the resident to be notified at least 24 hours before any unit could be opened except in cases of imminent danger to the building. Sarah eventually restocked her storage unit with new belongings, secure behind her own heavy-duty padlock. Her victory had unexpected consequences. Residents began attending meetings in greater numbers, and 3 new board members were elected at the annual meeting in August. Bernard retained his seat, but lost the presidency to Maria Chen, whose first official act was to establish a residents' rights committee. Whenever Bernard passed Sarah in the hallway, he would quicken his pace and look the other way. But many other residents would smile and wave, some still using the kitchen gadgets and camping gear they'd acquired during her community sharing event, a story that became part of the building's legendary history, the time one determined resident outsmarted an overreaching HOA board by taking their words literally and emptying her storage unit to prove a point about the true meaning of common property.